Moving into a new neighborhood is always a mixed bag of emotions. You're excited about starting fresh, but you also feel nervous about fitting in. That's how I felt when I moved into my new apartment. It was a small 2-bedroom unit in a quiet area, perfect for someone like me who enjoyed a peaceful life. The building was older, but it had character. Charming wooden floors, tall windows, and a lovely view of the trees outside. I quickly made it my home, but little did I know that the tranquility would soon be shattered. My neighbors were a mix of people, but there was one who stood out to me right away, the man in apartment 3B. I first noticed him on the day I moved in. He was standing outside his door, watching me with an intense gaze as I unloaded my boxes from the moving truck. At first, I thought he was just curious about the new arrival in the building, but something about the way he looked at me sent a shiver down my spine. He had dark hair, sharp features, and a blank expression that made him seem almost predatory. I smiled at him, trying to be friendly, but he didn't respond. Instead, he just continued to watch me as I carried my boxes inside. I shook off the feeling, telling myself that I was being paranoid. After all, it was a small building, and it was only natural for neighbors to notice each other. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new apartment. I met some of my other neighbors who were all friendly and welcoming. However, the man from 3B remained distant. He would occasionally cross my path in the hallway or at the mailbox, and each time he would stare without saying a word. I found it unsettling, but I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was just shy. But then things started to change. One evening, I was getting ready for bed when I noticed a shadow moving outside my window. I pulled back the curtains and saw him standing there, staring at my apartment. My heart raced as I watched him. He was just standing there, frozen in place, gazing up at my window. I felt exposed, like I was under a spotlight. I quickly closed the curtains and tried to shake off the fear that gripped me. The next day, I decided to confront my discomfort. I went to the building's management office to talk to the property manager, hoping to learn more about the man in 3B. She was a kind woman named Laura, and when I described him, her face paled slightly. "Oh, that's Tom," she said. "He's been here for a while, but he's a bit of a loner. We've had some complaints from other tenants about him being odd." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Odd how?" Laura hesitated. "He keeps to himself mostly. He doesn't socialize much, and sometimes he stares at people. I've tried to talk to him, but he just doesn't engage." I nodded, trying to process this information. "Has he ever done anything threatening?" She shook her head. "Not that I know of, but I would suggest keeping your doors locked and being cautious. It's always better to be safe." That conversation lingered in my mind for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about Tom. I tried to avoid him as much as possible, but he seemed to be everywhere I went. He would appear in the hallway just as I was leaving my apartment or be at the mailbox when I was collecting my mail. Each encounter left me feeling more anxious. One evening, I was in my kitchen cooking dinner when I heard a knock on my door. I froze. Who could it be? I glanced through the peephole and saw Tom standing there, his expression unreadable. My heart raced as I considered my options. Should I ignore him? What could he possibly want? I took a deep breath and opened the door a crack. "Yes?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Hey," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted to introduce myself properly. I'm Tom." "I know," I replied cautiously. "We've met." He looked momentarily taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. "Right. I just wanted to say that if you ever need anything, you can ask me. I'm usually around." "Thanks, but I'm okay," I said, not wanting to encourage any further conversation. He nodded slowly, and for a brief moment our eyes locked. I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something in his gaze that made me uneasy, something predatory lurking beneath the surface. I closed the door, locking it behind me, my heart racing. Over the next few days, I did my best to avoid him, but Tom seemed determined to catch me at odd moments. He would stand outside his apartment, waiting for me to come home, or linger near the entrance when I was leaving. I felt like I was being hunted, and the anxiety began to seep into every aspect of my life. Things took a darker turn when I started finding notes slipped under my door. At first, they were simple messages. Things like, "I hope you're settling in well," or "Let me know if you need help with anything." But the tone quickly shifted. One note read, "I see you when you're at home. You look happy." Another simply said, "You're beautiful." I felt sick to my stomach as I read the words. This was no longer a friendly neighbor. It was someone crossing a line. I showed the notes to Laura, who looked genuinely concerned. "This is serious. I'll talk to him," she promised. "We can't have this kind of behavior in the building." But when Laura confronted Tom, he denied everything. "I haven't done anything wrong," he insisted, his eyes cold and unyielding. "I'm just trying to be friendly." Laura couldn't force him to leave or take further action without solid evidence. I felt helpless. I wanted to call the police, but what could I say? That my neighbor was being creepy? They wouldn't take me seriously without proof. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself living in a constant state of fear. I installed a security camera at my front door, hoping it would deter Tom. I locked my doors and kept the curtains drawn, but I could still feel his eyes on me. One night, I was watching TV, trying to distract myself, when I heard a noise outside. My heart dropped as I moved to the window and peeked through the curtains. Sure enough, there he was, standing in the shadows, staring up at my apartment. I grabbed my phone and called 911, my hands trembling. 911? What's your emergency? The operator asked. There's a man outside my apartment, I said, my voice shaking. I think he's stalking me. He keeps watching me. Can you provide your address? The operator asked calmly. I gave them my address and they assured me that an officer was on the way. I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and fear. I was doing the right thing, but what if Tom saw me calling for help? I peered through the window, and to my horror, he had moved closer. I could see the outline of his face, and his eyes were locked on my window. I backed away, my heart racing as I tried to calm my breathing. The minutes felt like hours until I finally heard the sound of sirens outside. I rushed to the door, but before I could open it, I heard a loud knock. I quickly opened the door to find 2 officers standing there. "Ma'am, is everything okay?" one of them asked. "There's a man outside. He's been watching me for weeks," I said, my voice trembling. "I think he's stalking me." The officers nodded and stepped outside. I watched from my doorway, my heart in my throat, as they approached Tom, who was still standing nearby. They spoke to him for a few moments, and I could see Tom's expression shift. He looked agitated, his hands clenching into fists. After a brief exchange, the officers turned back to me. "He's claiming he was just out for a walk," one of them said, "but we'll have a word with him." They spoke to Tom again, and I could see him arguing with them, his body language defensive. Eventually, the officer seemed to have had enough and told him to leave the area. Tom shot me a glare before turning and walking away, but I could see the fury in his eyes. Once the officers left, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering fear. I thanked them for their help, but I knew this wasn't over. I had a feeling that Tom wouldn't just give up. He had become obsessed, and I didn't know what he was capable of. That night, I barely slept. I kept my phone close and checked the locks on my doors multiple times. Every sound sent me into a panic. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was still watching me. The following days were a blur of anxiety. I didn't leave my apartment unless I had to, and even then, I was hyper-aware of my surroundings. I started documenting everything, notes, encounters, and any strange behavior. I wanted a record to show the police if things escalated. A week later, I heard another knock on my door. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me when I saw Tom standing there. He had a smug look on his face, and my instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place. I slowly opened the door, barely enough to see him clearly. "Tom, what do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to apologize," he said, his voice unnervingly calm. "I know I've made you uncomfortable, but I didn't mean to. I just wanted to get to know you better. You seem like a nice person." I felt my stomach twist. His apology felt fake, like he was trying to manipulate me into feeling sorry for him. "I don't want anything to do with you," I said firmly, my voice shaking but resolute. "Please leave me alone." He stood there for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked away. I knew that this wasn't over. I couldn't be sure what he was planning, but I was done living in fear. I would take every step necessary to protect myself and make sure that Tom knew he couldn't intimidate me.